that he prescribed it in order for us to gain taqwa. So that essentially means that fasting has a higher goal, a higher objective, which is to gain the taqwa of Allah, to gain God consciousness, to be more aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's more to this than that. The Prophet ﷺ said, وَرُبَّ صَائِمٍ حَظُّهُ مِنْ صَوْمِهِ الْجُوعُ وَالْعَطَشِ. There are many people who fast. The only thing they attain is hunger and thirst. Meaning this is a criticism. So fasting, therefore, is a process of disciplining yourself.
They're capitalizing on Ramadan.
It is worrying. I mean, we do live in an age of like extreme marketing and consumerism and people manipulating, I guess, Islamic practices for their own personal gain. Person who doesn't pray, whether he's considered even Muslim or not.
Oh, subhanallah.
So that's the real issue.
Asalamualiakum wa rahmatullah. Welcome back to another episode of AAA. I'm your host, Saif, and we have with us our co-host, Yahya. And today we have a special guest with us, my beloved brother, Sheikh Alomgir. Assalamualaikum.
How are you, Sheikh? Alhamdulillah, good.
Alhamdulillah. Just a little background on Sheikh Alomgir. He's a graduate from Azar University, the renowned Azar University in Islamic law. He's also done his BA in Arabic and English. And he's been teaching for over 20 years now and continues to teach in various platforms. He's lectured both nationally and internationally. Sheikh, we're going to start on this Ramadan special.
Yeah.
And I thought we'll start with a verse of the Quran. Yahya, if you could, inshallah. Ya ayyuhalladhina.
Oh, yeah. So, يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون.
If you can give us a small tafsir. This was the verse that was given in the second hijrah, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala obligated fasting on the Muslims.
Yeah. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Firstly, Jazakumullah khairan for inviting me. So, fasting, as you know, as we all know, is one of the fundamental pillars of our religion.
Yeah.
And the obligation, as you mentioned, for fasting was finalized in the second year after Hijrah. So in this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kutiba alaykumus siyam, that fasting, O you who believe, fasting has been prescribed upon you, just as it was prescribed upon those who came before you, in order for you to gain taqwa. So, I mean, there are a number of things that can be said about this ayah. We could probably spend the whole podcast speaking about this ayah. But to cut it very, very short, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us that, number one, it's an obligation. Number two, that it's something that Allah prescribed for previous nations as well, meaning previous believing nations were also asked to fast as well. So this is a recurrent act of worship, throughout the ages and throughout the different nations. But he also mentions that he prescribed it in order for us to gain taqwa. So that essentially means that fasting has a higher goal, a higher objective, which is to gain the taqwa of Allah, to gain God consciousness, to be more aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Is there more depth on taqwa? The term taqwa, we hear it a lot, and a lot of people misuse it, perhaps sometimes as well. It's more than just God consciousness, isn't it?
Yeah, so, I mean, the word itself, linguistic, I mean, some people translate it as, it used to be translated as like fear of God. Fear of Allah. Which, obviously, the more appropriate term for that would be like khawf or khashya. So the word taqwa is related to the word in the Arabic language, wiqaya, which means protection or barrier, exactly. Waqa yaqi, from the verb. And so the idea is that a person is protecting himself from certain things. So he's protecting himself from the wrath and the anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by imtithalul awamir, by fulfilling the commandments and staying away from sins. So it's essentially where you enter into a state of consciousness and awareness such that you're really aware and sensitive to your surroundings, to your own actions, making sure that you are fulfilling your obligations to Allah and that you are striving to stay away from anything that can anger or upset Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
True.
So I guess God consciousness is meaning it's that you're in a state of awareness.
Yes.
But the idea of this awareness is to protect yourself. Again, from the wrath and from the anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But it's not just the anger aspect of Allah, but that awareness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
And there's different levels to this as well. Like I understand if you come, there's Muslim, there's also Muhsin now,
and Mu'min.
And Mu'min
Yeah. So there are, in terms of with regards to taqwa, I mean, I guess that's a slightly different topic.
Yes.
The different levels that a person can
attain.
Faith, and you have someone who submits outwardly. That's the Muslim. Someone who believes inwardly.
But assumably, a person with more taqwa will be on the higher level. Muhsin's the highest level, I would say.
Yeah, from the the Muslim and the Mu'min and the Muhsin, then that's of you can say the highest level. But when it comes to taqwa, there are different things that you have taqwa of. Like, for example, protecting yourself from falling into shirk, protecting yourself from falling into kufr, protecting yourself from falling into bid'ah and innovation and sin and ma'asi, kaba'ir and sagha'ir, major sins and the lesser sins. So you have to protect yourselves from all of those elements.
Okay. The Prophet ﷺ said, he divided Ramadan in 3, where he said the first 10 is for maghfirah.
Yeah.
And the second 10 are for
rahmah,
and then the last third is for atq min al-niran, which is basically being protected from hellfire. So how can we use the most of those 3, the way the Prophet ﷺ has divided it? How can we make the most of it to attain taqwa?
Actually, before I answer that, I mean, I think just one important thing that we probably need to speak about is the sort of connection between the fasting and taqwa. So how is it that we get from fasting to taqwa? What is it in essence? And there are a couple of ways that we can say that fasting it leads to taqwa. Number one, that when you are fasting, you have to keep in mind that the objective of fasting is not just to stop eating and drinking. There's more to this than that. The Prophet ﷺ said, وَرُبَّ صَائِمٍ حَظُّهُ مِنْ صَوْمِهِ الْجُوعُ وَالْعَطَشِ. There are many people who fast. The only thing they attain is hunger and thirst. Meaning this is a criticism, right? As if to say, look, there are people who fast, but they only attain hunger and thirst, meaning they don't attain anything more than that. So therefore, staying away from eating and drinking is a means to a greater end, which is the taqwa itself. And the way you get there is by, number one, by realizing that, look, if I can train myself to stay away from things which are essentially permissible in our religion, eating and drinking is good. Fulfilling your shahwah in a halal way is a good thing. If you can train yourself to stay away from those things which are in principle halal, then staying away from things which are haram becomes easier. So fasting, therefore, is a process of disciplining yourself.
But someone would say that just staying away from drinking and eating is basically all I need to do. In Ramadan. What would you advise?
Then, firstly, we need to understand the objectives behind fasting. And as the Prophet mentioned in this hadith, that there are many people who fast and the only thing they attain is hunger and thirst. So clearly, they need to realize that that's not the objective. The objective isn't.
What about the guys? And there's a lot of variance in ability within the Muslims, and some don't even pray. Within our community, a lot of us they don't pray. And but they still want to fast. So they fast, but they don't pray. How would you say? Are their fasts completely invalid? Should they forget doing that as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's just an unfortunate state. I mean, there could be a number of reasons why that could happen. Maybe it's a matter of like social pressure. Some people might feel the need to fast because they want to feel a part of the community. Because I guess one of the unique things about fasting, it has a different social element to it than prayer. When you pray by yourself, or it's not as social.
It's more communal and social.
Whereas fasting, subhanallah, it's like the whole community comes together. It's taraweeh and the iftar. And so if a person isn't fasting, they might feel somewhat left out. But at the same time, I guess some people might take Ramadan as an opportunity to sort of kickstart, their worship and returning back to Allah. And so they try to maybe utilize fasting. But if they're not if they're not praying at the same time, then obviously this is a major shortfall. And person has to ask themselves, prayer is just as important, if not more important, than fasting.
But from the hadith that you narrated, would you say that their fasting isn't valid because they're not praying?
I mean, there isn't a direct connection per se between fasting and the prayer. However, there is a discussion about whether a person who doesn't pray, whether he's considered even Muslim or not.
Oh, subhanallah.
So that's the real issue. Now, historically speaking, in terms of the position of the four schools of thought, the Hanafi, Maliki, and Shafi'is, they are of the view that a person who doesn't pray out of laziness, obviously is a sinner, but can still be technically a believer.
Yeah.
In the Hanbali school, the one who abandons the prayer out of laziness is considered a non-Muslim.
Okay.
So if a person, and obviously there's a process to this though. It's not just that, okay, he's not praying, okay, he's a kafir, right? Meaning there has to be a process to this where a person has to be advised. A person of knowledge, a scholar has to come, sit him down, explain to him, that look, what you're doing will take you outside the fold of Islam. I don't think that's the case.
What about the case of those, which is more common? Perhaps they delay their prayers and pray four of them together. Yeah. And they think, look, I'm doing one bad there, but I don't want to do another bad. So this one's a good action. Let me do some good at least, and perhaps, I may fall into it at some point.
It's still obviously it's a shortcoming, a major shortcoming for a person to, inna salata kanat ala al-mu'minina kitaban mawquta. Prayer has been prescribed according to fixed times, right? So you have to pray each salah in its fixed and stated time. And delaying the prayer beyond its stated time is considered to be a kabira. It's a major sin, and that's something which the scholars all are in agreement. Obviously, there are excuses where you can combine, and due to like traveling and illness and other circumstances. But to intentionally miss the prayer, this is a serious issue, and a person should strive to pray on time.
I think one of the first questions you ask on the Day of Judgment, Naam, is about your salah.
Yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
So, guys, salah on point, inshallah.
Yeah.
Inshallah. So the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ said, he divided the Ramadan in 3.
Yeah. So I guess first thing to say is that there were quite a few scholars who considered the hadith to be weak.
Okay.
So that's one issue.
Yeah.
But not taking the fact away that the prayer the fast of Ramadan does contain those elements.
Yes.
It has the elements of maghfirah, rahmah, and itq, being, freed from the hellfire. Yeah. So, for example, when it comes to forgiveness, the Prophet ﷺ said, Allah, He frees servants from the hellfire every night.
Allahu Akbar.
Every night in Ramadan, Allah is freeing people, and on the time of breaking fast as well.
Yeah.
Imagine that at the time of breaking fast, someone has been freed from the hellfire. The rahmah is immense in Ramadan, to the extent, and in a beautiful hadith actually, it mentions the Prophet ﷺ was once climbing the minbar, so he took a step. Every time he took a step, he said, Ameen.
Yes,
and the Sahaba, they said, Ya Rasulullah, you're saying Ameen, but we haven't heard any dua. He said, Jibreel came to me, and he made 3 du'as, and on each occasion I said Ameen. So on the first dua that he made was, Man adraka Ramadan, that whoever witnesses Ramadan, falam yughfar lahu, but he's not forgiven. Yeah. In one riwayah it says, fa'abadahu Allah, like may Allah take him far away from His mercy. Meaning, and this is not like a harsh dua in principle, but what Jibreel is saying is that the opportunities to earn Allah's forgiveness are so immense that you would have to be an extremely terrible person not to be forgiven. So, subhanallah, and that it shows you that the ability to attain the rahmah and the forgiveness of Allah in this month is just immense.
So it's definitely referred to universally as the month of mercy, no?
Yes, it's known as Shahrur, rahmah.
It's also known as the month of the Quran, so the Quran was revealed.
That's right.
But not the whole Quran. I think the first part, on the first verses of the Quran was revealed.
So there are 2 aspects. Firstly, when the Quran was revealed from the Lawh al-Mahfuz, the sacred tablet, and it was sent down to Baytul Izzah, which is a house in the heavens above. And the entire Quran was sent down to Baytul Izzah in the Sama' al-Dunya in the month of Ramadan. And then also the first few verses that were revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam were revealed in the month of Ramadan.
MashaAllah, you're going into depth there. So this question I've got, like the hadith comes to mind where the Prophet ﷺ said, when Ramadan begins, the gates of paradise are opened and the gates of hell are closed and the devils are chained up. And that's a Sahih hadith. But what we find now within our community and a lot of people within us, they struggle with doing acts of righteousness and still have bad habits.
Yeah.
And they carry on throughout the whole of Ramadan. Now, in that in mind, if the shaitan's locked up, why does this happen, Sheikh?
Yeah. So it's a common question people ask, like, you know, I mean, firstly, what does it mean that the devils are locked up? You know, so here scholars have different perspectives. The common understanding is that the devils are chained up literally. This is the, you know, so some scholars look at it literally. So the devils are chained up, but then they discuss what type of devils. So you have like major devils and you have minor devils. So you have the marada min ash-shayatin, which are the major rebellious devils, you could say. I mean, they're all rebellious in nature, I guess, but the major devils, they're the ones that are chained up. And so they're not as effective. So you have the lesser devils or the smaller devils, they still might be able to influence people. So that could be a reason why people end up maybe still committing wrong. But even if we were to take the view that all of the devils are locked up.
So the lesser devils can still do waswas and come
according to that view.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there's another view that says, no, all the devils are chained up. And so but people can still commit evil because it's due to the evil of their own selves. You know, the Prophet often would say, وَنَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنْ شُرُورِ أَنفُسِنَا. We seek refuge in Allah from the evil of our own selves. So sometimes we can be, you know, so, you know, habituated to commit sin and have bad characteristics and, you know, flaws, that the shaitan doesn't need to do anything because it's due to our own ill character. But to be honest, there is another view that says that the chaining of the devils is more of a figure of speech.
Okay.
To say that due to the impact of fasting, the devils aren't effective as they normally are. Yeah, this is a common view amongst many scholars. So, I mean, they're chained up in the sense that they can't influence you.
Because you don't have food or drink.
Yeah, because you're so disciplined now.
That's very true. It does happen here. When you don't have food or drink, you're not thinking about other things.
Exactly. That's the whole purpose of the fast, you know, to get you more closer to Allah. And, you know, and because one of the ways that the devil attacks a person is through his shahawat, through his desires. But when you're not eating and you're feeling very weak, your shahwa decreases.
True. That's very true.
Subhanallah. Okay.
I actually had an interesting question, which is, you know, when we're young, Ramadan comes in, everyone's motivated to read as much as Quran as they can.
Yeah.
In the beginning, and they just start reading it without feeling the impact of it. Right? And the older you grow, the more you understand that.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just reading the ayats, because that's when you start understanding and it impacting you. So what would you advise, like people that are going through a marathon through the Quran just from end to end?
Yeah.
What would you advise them?
So I think
like a khatam or
khatam,
When we do that in the Bengali culture, they love doing that. Pakistan as well. They want to do 1 or 2 khatams.
So I mean, there's a couple of things here. I mean, I guess
there are people that do 20 times, 30 times.
Yeah. Imam Shafi'i
20, 30 times.
Imam Shafi'i 60 times.
60 times.
He used to do 2 khatams a day.
How is that possible?
I actually have a sheikh.
Yeah.
I get happy when I get through Baqarah in the day.
No. There is a sheikh in Masjid al-Hikmah. I'm not sure if you know, in Birmingham. It's part of Masjid Green Lane.
Okay.
He does like same 60.
MashaAllah.
Just twice.
Oh, right. Okay. I mean, it is physically possible. I mean, like literally, there's actually
I've seen it on YouTube at 2 speed. Doing that at 6 hours.
There's someone. If you go to YouTube, there's actually one that I tend to share with people. Is a whole khatam of Quran in 7 hours, just over 7 hours. And subhanallah, and it's not sped up. It's not sped up. And he's so proficient in his recitation that, I mean, he doesn't compromise on anything.
On ahkam,
and his ahkam, because usually when people recite very fast, they end up missing harakat or letters and things like that. So, but I mean, I guess the idea of the marathon and you know, going into the month really sort of headstrong.
Yeah.
I guess a person has to be careful not to burn themselves out. That's important. So a lot of people, they start very strong, In the middle of the month, it sort of wanes, and then at the end of the month, they pick up.
They don't want to do that. You shouldn't do that, because the last 10, if you get Laylatul Qadr,
exactly,
and the last 10, then subhanAllah, you.
So that's why, I think it's important that you sort of take things a step at a time. Start gradually. Obviously do more than you would do outside of Ramadan, but then gradually throughout the month try to increase in effort until you sort of hit that peak, and you want to be hitting the peak in the sort of last 10 nights.
Would you say then it's more important to read or to understand?
Yeah,
because you're still getting hasanat when you're reading.
Yeah.
But then would you say it's more important
to
read as much as
each letter you get 10 ajrs?
Yeah, and that could be multiplied by more.
So would you say it's much more important to read?
Yeah.
Or to understand.
This is again one of like in the lead up to the month of Ramadan, I get asked this question so much. I think in the last few weeks probably been asked about 10 to 20 times. It's a real issue. I mean, I guess in our community it's more of a pertinent question because a lot of people don't understand Arabic, whereas in the past, it was assumed that when you would read the Quran, you would be understanding what you are reciting. So we have this added factor that didn't exist before. I think it's important to remember that, a couple of things. Firstly, Allah, He revealed the Quran for a purpose. And that purpose is for us to reflect over it, to act upon it, and to be shaped by it. كتاب أنزلناه إليك مبارك ليدبروا آياته وليتذكر أولو الألباب. This is a blessed book that we have sent down in order for people to reflect over it and to be reminded, so the people of intelligence are reminded by it. And the key to being able to contemplate its meanings is to understand it. So that we have to keep in the back of our mind, that is the goal. Now, in the meantime, specifically in the context of Ramadan, I mean, outside the context of Ramadan, that has to be the goal. That your relationship with the Quran should be primarily based on understanding, primarily. But within the context of Ramadan, time is very limited, and people want to recite as much as they can because of that element, as you mentioned, of the more you recite, the more ajr there is. But at the same time, you don't want to miss out on the major goal of the Quran. I mean, Imam Hassan al-Basri, he said, إِنَّمَا نَزَلَ الْقُرْآنِ لِيُعْمَلَ بِهِ. That the Quran was sent down for people to act upon it. فَاتَّخَذَ النَّاسُ تِلَاوَتَهُ وَعَمَلَهُ. But then what happened is people began to take its mere tilawa as its main action. And that's something that he's lamenting. And he's saying, this shouldn't be the case. But as I said, we have to factor in that in Ramadan it's a specific scenario where people want to try to amass as many good deeds as they possibly can, but at the same time not forget the overall goal. So what I advise people is that, you should combine between both, right? Where you focus on your tilawa as well as its understanding. And you can do this in a number of ways, whether it be by, reading the translation, of like a page at a time, read the translation, and then read the Arabic, right? So try and pick up on keywords, for example. Try and focus on that, as if you don't know Arabic. Obviously, if you don't understand, if you understand Arabic, then this is, it should be an easy thing. That every time you recite an ayah, you're thinking about it, and you recite as much as you possibly can.
There's also the conversation that you have with Allah Subhanahu wa Taala.
Yeah, it's kalamullah.
The beauty of when you read Surah Al-Fatiha. Before I never knew about it. But when you say Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, the Malaika, Allah Subhanahu Hamadani Abdi. So I think there's a beauty to actually understanding what you're reading, because you are really having a conversation with Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that, subhanallah, it reminds me that of what Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah mentioned, that one of the important inner dimensions that you should have when reciting the Quran is realize that Allah is essentially speaking to you. His speech. You should venerate his speech. Realize that, Ikrimah, for example, every time he would recite the Quran, he would put the mushaf on his face and he said, Hada kalamu Rabbi, Hada kalamu Rabbi. These are the words of my Lord. And he would be emotionally very moved by that, subhanallah. So just keeping that in mind when you recite that these are the words of my Lord can have a tremendous impact. But going back to that point about, combining between
understanding
and
you were saying a balance between the two.
Yeah, a balance between the two. Now, realistically speaking, a lot of people say, well, I can't do both. I don't have enough time. Like, for example, to recite a juz a day, depending on how proficient a person is, it can take from anything from 20 minutes to an hour, for example. Yeah. So if I'm now going to be reading the translation or trying to read the tafsir, that's like 2 hours in a day maybe, and I don't have that time because I'm working or studying or what have you.
Family, yeah.
But what I would suggest is that, look, at the end of the day, doing a khatam in Quran is nice, it's good. The Prophet ﷺ would recite the Quran more in Ramadan. He would recite it to Jibreel every night, basically. He would recite the whole, not the whole Quran every night, but he would recite a lot of the Quran every night to Jibreel. So it's a good thing. But if you can't do a juz a night, because you are spending time on trying to understand the basic meanings of what you're reciting.
I think most average people take about an hour to do a juz, no?
Oh.
That might be a little...
It depends how proficient.
Yeah, it depends,
Some people do it 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, if it's a result of not being proficient enough, then okay, and at the end of the day, as the Prophet ﷺ said, وَالَّذِي يَتَتَعْتَعُ فِيهِ وَهُوَ عَلَيْهِ شَاقٌ فَلَهُ أَجْرَانِ. Whoever struggles to recite and finds it difficult, he gets 2 rewards, So, but as I said, look, if it's a matter of time and you don't have the time, you don't have to do a khatam. You don't have to do, as the Prophet, some of the Sahaba used to say, لا يكن همك آخر surah. Let not your concern be, when am I going to reach to the end of the surah? But that's what happens when you're in that juz mode.
Yeah.
Okay, how many pages do I have left? Yeah, that shouldn't be your concern.
True.
It shouldn't be your concern. So don't worry about the khatam.
Yeah.
Honestly, the most important thing is that you're benefiting from the Quran. True. That's the most important thing. Yeah.
Can you give us an insight on how the Prophet ﷺ conducted his day in Ramadan? So from perhaps Fajr, waking up, and then going from there.
Yeah.
How different is it perhaps to our lifestyle and how we can take from that?
Yeah.
So would he go to Jamaat, all 5 prayers? Where did he do sunnahs? How did he eat?
Yeah.
Breaking his fast. Nowadays we're looking forward to our 3-course meals during iftar, samosas and everything, and then making our suhoor just as iftar finished. So perhaps you can give us.
So I mean, the first important thing, it was I think it was maybe Anas ibn Malik. It was another companion who said, let not your day of fasting not be like the day you don't fast.
Yeah.
Meaning, the day that you fast shouldn't be differentiated from a normal day just by the fact that you're fasting. There has to be more, basically. So, there needs to be an increase in your salah, in your dhikr, in your awareness, in your tilawah. Everything, essentially, you are in a heightened state of awareness and in terms of ibadah. So that's one important thing. I think, unfortunately, for a lot of people in Ramadan, the only thing that differentiates a day in Ramadan from any other day is the fact that they're fasting and maybe they go taraweeh.
Yes.
Maybe you could add to that, they probably end up eting more, which is a disaster because the whole point of Ramadan. And one thing I always find funny is, when you see like marketing and the sort of typical images that are associated with acts of worship.
Yeah.
When you think of Ramadan, what image do you think of? I just want to ask you, what image do you normally see?
Dates.
Dates, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, but subhanAllah, Ramadan isn't meant to be about more food. It's meant to be about less food.
Yes.
Right?
SubhanAllah,
Yeah, because the whole point is that you're learning to discipline yourself in your eating.
True.
That's why Imam al-Ghazali, he said that anyone who basically ends up eating more food in Ramadan, right, he's completely missed the objective of fasting.
That would be the whole community, Sheikh.
SubhanAllah,
because the sales in the grocery shop tonight, I know
they double
their sales in Ramadan.
I guess there's another thing, which is that in the month of Ramadan, people like having like cultural foods.
Yes.
Like Bengalis, we have like Zaw and Sana.
Yes.
What do you have in Somalia?
What's it called? Sambusa and burr.
Burr, yeah.
Yeah, burr is like
Wheat.
No,
Or
it's wheat, but it's
yeah,
like I don't know. I'll show it to you later.
Yeah.
I think I've had
Okay.
it once.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So-
yeah.
So that's fine.
And
Like,
pancakes and all of
yeah,
those.
having like
But
traditional.
there's another element to it as well, and I've
Yeah.
seen, especially now, because we've made it more of a bit of a festival that the families get together.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of families over. That's why there's more consumption, perhaps,
Yeah.
of the food as well.
Yeah, so there is that added element of when more people gather together. I mean, I guess that's a beautiful aspect actually of Ramadan, where people can break bread together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a a community feeling.
Yeah.
Young children really, when they think of
motivated,
Ramadan, they think of that. Yeah, it gives them that sort of spirit.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we don't want to turn Ramadan into like a festival
Yes.
of eating.
True.
It shouldn't be it shouldn't be a festival of eating, because Ramadan is about learning discipline of controlling your desires, controlling your appetite. So, have your nice food, not a problem. Have your cultural foods, but don't be excessive, right? Don't be excessive. Don't, like at the time of iftar, have all 3 meals, breakfast, lunch and dinner,
And
all
then
in
the
one.
water, Yeah.
No, you're going to defeat the whole purpose of fasting,
Okay. So if you've gained too much weight during Ramadan, you haven't really found
That's
the
a
purpose.
worrying sign. Yeah, I would say it's a worrying sign. I mean, Ramadan ideally
Yeah.
should be a golden opportunity to kickstart good eating habits and losing weight. Really, it should be.
Yeah, that's the aim of certain people as well.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
myself.
Alhamdulillah.
Joke. Stop.
What's actually saying that? Would that be a bad intention? Because actions are by intentions, and
Yeah.
obviously certain actions, if you do it, Allah
Yeah.
subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't accept it.
Yeah.
But if you had an added intention of, I want to be a bit more fit by the end of Ramadan, I want to
Yeah.
trim up, maybe
Yeah.
get a 6-pack. Would that be a bad
Yeah.
intention to have during Ramadan? Obviously,
You've been obsessed
Taqwa
with
is just
So-
mentioned it.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm saying.
There's a hadith. I mean, some scholars say it's a weak hadith, but sumu tasihhu,
So,
which is fast and you will be healthy.
Mm.
Yeah. So there are definitely
They definitely know that the
intermittent fasting now. It's a
intermittent
big
fasting,
thing.
they found it in the
they
fitness
found
industry. They found so much science to prove it, and this and that.
So exactly. So by fasting, you would think. So people might make that part of their intention. Now, does that have an impact on the state of a person's fast? Well, when it comes to having multiple intentions in acts of worship, that's when you have to be a bit careful, because what you don't want to happen is that that your motive, for example, for gaining fitness or losing weight becomes your main objective. Now, if that becomes your main objective, that's where it becomes very worrying. As long as your main objective and the main motive behind your fasting is that it's an act of worship, you want to please Allah, you want to fulfill this obligation, that's the most important thing. If you have other like added sub-intentions, you can call it maybe, maybe it can take away something from the value of your fast,
Yes.
but it won't nullify your fast.
I'll be a bit cheeky here.
Yeah.
The Prophet ﷺ said, your body has right upon you.
Yes.
So what if you are taking that intention of losing weight because of trying to achieve?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's good. So if you can have multiple good intentions. Yeah.
Get it.
So if you're so you mentioned 6-pack before. Yeah. So
that could be-
Maybe a
That's-
brother wants to get married.
okay, well,
Then he's like, the only way I can do this is.
yeah. So if it's just down to aesthetics, then I would say that's
That's not the way forward.
I mean, there's no harm in wanting, Inna Allah
Yeah.
jamilun yuhibbul jamal. Allah is beautiful, He loves beauty. But we have to be careful of what I call Shahwah Khafiyah. I mean, not what I call, but scholars call Shahwah Khafiyah, which is when it's essentially lip service, right? Where there's a hidden desire. Yeah, you have a hidden desire, but you sugarcoat it with a nice Islamic motive.
Yes.
So, we have to be careful of that. The nafs is very deceptive. We have to be careful of
Very
that.
true.
So, but your intention, what you mentioned of,
The body has right upon
that you want to take care of your body,
Yeah.
Because it's an amana.
Yeah.
Our bodies they don't belong to us.
Yeah.
They belong to Allah. That's the meaning of inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. We belong to Allah. Our bodies we don't own our bodies. So if you have the intention, I want to fast because to take care of this body that Allah has given me, that's you're basically adding another positive intention to your main intention, and that's good. But if it's solely, what we call hadhun nafs, solely like your own personal interest, that can make, sort of take away from the value of the fast, but it won't invalidate it.
What was the term you used when you said sugarcoating the intention with?
There's a thing called Shahwah Khafiyah, which is a hidden desire, a hidden lust, which is basically where it's so hidden that it's difficult for you to detect. And so what ends up happening...
Is it like riyah or showing off or something?
Yeah, but in this case, like riyah is very hidden. Sometimes you don't notice that you're doing it.
Yeah.
That's a Shahwah Khafiyah. But in this context where a person basically manipulates the Shahwah Khafiyah and sugarcoats it with an Islamic motive. Right? So for example, as you said, riyah, like I'm going to pray for the sake of Allah. But you're saying this to yourself, but really what you're doing is trying to impress other people. So that's why you have to be very careful. That's why the niyyah is one of the most difficult things to manage.
I'm going to get to a bit of a controversial topic now, because now what's happening in Ramadan, over the years, you see it more often, and for the last 2 decades perhaps, from what I remember it in the early 2000s when I started, it's become so commercialized, subhanAllah, from everything, and social media has added to this commercial aspect. And you were saying about the intentions there. Is there a lot of people, are they out there capitalizing on Ramadan?
It is worrying. I mean, we do live in an age of like extreme marketing and consumerism and people manipulating, I guess, Islamic practices for their own personal gain. And I think people have to maybe, check themselves and ask themselves, what's really motivating them. And you don't want to manipulate and take advantage of whether it be a hadith or whether it be ayat or Islamic values for your own personal gain, or even for the gain. I mean, even if you might say it might not be personal gain, but it could be for the gain of an Islamic organization or an Islamic charity. So, to encourage people, for example, people will have different methods and tactics of encouraging people to donate, for example. Encourage them, like encouraging people to, by quoting ayat from Quran and hadith. I mean, that's a good thing because you're reminding people about their core values at the end of the day. But we have to ask ourselves, are we just are we actually doing it genuinely because we want them to donate, benefit from the ayat? We want them to sort of capture the teachings of these ayat and verses and hadith, or is it just that we just want to, basically, we want something from them, and that's a very fine line. I think it's a fine line between the two.
How about like doing an iftar and paying £200 or £300 for an iftar with a celebrity sheikh? Would that
where you have to? Oh, you pay to have iftar with them?
With them. So you're there. There's usually like 400 people to an iftar, and there's a big or a renowned chef that comes out, and they charge excessive. Sometimes even VIP seats might cost a little bit more.
Well, I mean, it's...
That's very...
it's happening.
I mean, it's... Yeah, I mean, I'm still, to be honest, I'm still like observing this phenomenon and trying to understand it. It doesn't sit well with me, I have to say, from the onset. It doesn't sit well with me, and I'm concerned even by the fact that there are people of knowledge that are willing to engage in that way, especially this notion of VIP tickets, like paying extra money to sit with the sheikh.
They even do that with masjids. I think they start competing with each other to get this person, and then they have to pay extra. Then does it? I don't know if it is, but sometimes does it become an auction between them because there's only one person of that caliber?
Oh, really? Subhanallah. Yeah, I mean, as I said, I'm still learning about it. I mean, these things are very worrying.
Subhanallah, I heard about one shiukh with a good voice who led prayer in one of the mosques in London, and I think he was paid like 20 to 25k for leading just taraweeh.
Yeah, I've heard of that as well.
And I've heard of for me, in my mind, that sounds excessive. Somebody might do that.
Why not? Don't you think sometimes they deserve it, Sheikh? Because sometimes that's the only income that they have.
Well, I mean, firstly,
I mean, for certain ulama, Allahumma barik, that's the only thing that they do for a living.
Yeah.
Would it not be fair for them to gain as well.
From it. Isn't it on the
And
other
why-
end of the spectrum, like you're
and
selling
why
the
do
verses
we-
of Allah?
But that's the thing. Why do we value them less than someone that's working as a banker?
I
or
guess
someone that is working.
Yes.
Why do we not raise the what's it called, the value of da'wah in general?
Yeah.
I mean, I hate it that's commercialized, but I'd say to her, why do we not raise them
Yeah.
to a level where they're really kind of advising people?
Well, a guy in finance is after money. He went in with that intention.
True. But why not give both?
I mean, it's good you
وخذ
raise
نصيبك
that.
من الدنيا.
Yeah. I mean, it's good that you mentioned that. I think that because there are two elements here. Firstly, as you mentioned, there is a difference between a banker and a qari. A banker's in it for the money, right?
Yeah.
A qari is in it for spreading khair, spreading goodness and spreading knowledge and awareness of the Quran, etc. So there's the difference. But then there is the other element, which you mentioned, that, how do we expect, people of knowledge and, people of Quran to live if they're expected to do everything for free?
Of course.
So that's the other element. But then it becomes there's a fine line between, meeting your needs and exploiting the circumstances. And I think that's where some people have crossed the line. For example, leading taraweeh in from what I've seen anyway, most masajid, they would give maybe 1,000 to 2,000, maybe 3,000 to an imam. To pay £25,000 seems very extortionate. And in addition to that, paying for first class flights, for example, and high end accommodation, it doesn't sit well.
Is it not like karama for that person?
Now here, so to honor a person, in fact,
karama as well for the, being able to, lead, because leading taraweeh is not easy on its own.
True.
You know what I mean?
It's a hard thing.
Yeah, it's very hard.
Yeah, it is very hard. But at the same time, you see, there's another issue, which is that wealth that comes your way.
I'm a bit more positive.
It's good to have different perspectives and discuss them, I guess. As the Prophet ﷺ said, when wealth comes your way, but you're not seeking it, then take it. Meaning this is the rizq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But where we have, for example, contracts and specific demands now, like, look, I will lead for you on condition you give me a first class flight and hotels and I expect £25,000, for example.
No, I'm with you on that point.
I think that's worrying. And then you have to think about, why are people doing that? Why are masajid, for example, inviting well-known qadis? Now, again, that could be due to multiple reasons. I think one could be because, they genuinely want people to benefit from a proficient reciter. Now, utilizing that sheikh as an avenue to increase in raising your funds.
Would that be a bad intention?
Well, as I said,
if they are getting a celebrity sheikh, they're going to have more publicity, more people coming over, and essentially more donations. So that will help their mosque.
In hindsight, it seems like it's just a tactic, right? It's a marketing tactic to try and increase the funds. But then, you see, we have to think about what I was mentioning before about the Shahwah Khafiyah, by these hidden desires. And we have to try to be as genuine as we can. I think when it comes to ibadah, when it comes to wanting to benefit people, we have to genuinely think about what is the best for people. And try to be as transparent as much as we possibly can. Transparency is very important. And I think if people were to say, look, the reason why we're bringing this qari is because this is the night we want to do donations. There's a thing there about transparency, which I think it's worrying. If your main motive is for people to benefit at the end of the day, because the last thing we want to do is create a craze where people just come just because they'll come because they like listening to the recitation of a particular qari. That's another issue as well, I guess. And that's another worrying thing because the last thing
is that an issue actually? If I came to a masjid because I like his recitation, and it makes me, and and a lot of I think 70% of the Muslim population might not understand the Quran, the Arabic form. So a lot of people, Bengalis, Pakistanis, and the Indonesians and so forth. But certain voices, affect the heart.
Yeah.
And the way the Quran is read, and we understand a few words in there and we understand what's going on. But, would that be wrong to go to a masjid and travel because, subhanAllah, this shuyukh is leading and his voice is incredible.
Yeah.
And it stirs my heart in a good way.
I think it would the sort of my advice would differ from person to person depending on their circumstances. So if it's, you can have a number of groups you could have different types of people. You can have one person who genuinely is going there because due to the sound of the voice. The sound is melodious, right? Yeah. Beyond the melody, there isn't anything else for them because of the lack of understanding, right? Now, that issue of feeling, that feeling you get when listening to a nice qari, that feeling, we have to be careful. Again, we don't want it to be a matter of Shahwah Khafiyah, right? Because all human beings like listening to nice sounds.
Sure.
All human beings. Children do, even. Children, when they hear nice sounds, they will be intrigued. They want to listen to it more and more. So it's a natural human thing to like listening to something which is melodious.
Yeah.
We don't want that to be the case with the Quran. Although, وَرَتِّلِ الْقُرْآنَ تَرْتِيلًا, recite the Quran in a slow, melodious way. تَغَنُّوا بِالْقُرْآنِ in a hadith that recite the Quran beautifully. The Prophet ﷺ said that مَنْ لَمْ يَتَغَنَّ فَلَيْسَ مِنِّي. Whoever doesn't recite the Quran beautifully, that's according to one understanding of what يَتَغَنَّ means, then it's not from me. So we have to be careful. When we say we are affected by the Quran, what does it actually mean? Is it the case that you are hearing really nice recitation and that's just moving you?
Yeah.
And you're enjoying that experience? Or is it the case that it is moving you as intended? Like, for example, I remember once listening to this clip of, it was a clip of Indonesian or Malaysian qari. And he was reciting in the mujawwad form.
Yeah.
The slower form, right?
Oh, sorry.
And he was like Husari, and he's reciting different maqamat, and then he hit these notes, and then he suddenly, right? You see him smiling,
He's smiling in prayer.
Yeah, no, it wasn't in salah. It was like we're sitting here,
okay.
so he's reciting, and the crowd are like cheering him on, right?
Yeah.
And,
the Egyptian way or the
He said, "Ya salam, Allah yaftah alayk," and he begins to smile. But I think, subhanallah, you know what? He was reciting ayat of Jahannam.
Allahumma.
He was reciting ayat of Jahannam. So then you think, subhanallah, all those people in that crowd, they were like cheering him on, and they're like, and they were being moved, they were being emotionally affected. What was it? Was it really that they were being emotionally affected? Because he was reciting about Jahannam, and that's not something that you will start
literally laugh
smiling.
about. Yeah.
So it shows you that there's a difference between enjoying melody and being impacted by the recitation, which reflects the meaning of what is being recited. That's why Rasulullah ﷺ said, أَحْسَنُ النَّاسِ صَوْتًا بِالْقُرْآنِ, the best reciter, the one who has the best voice. Man إِذَا سَمِعْتُمُوهُ is the one who, when you hear him recite, حَسِبْتُمُوهُ يَخْشَى اللَّهِ, you think that this person fears Allah.
Subhanallah.
That's the best reciter.
True.
So if it's the case for you, you go to a reciter and you hear him recite and you feel the khashya every time he mentions Allah. You tremble. Every time he mentions Jannah, you yearn for it. Every time he mentions Jahannam, you start fearing. Okay. Now you can say that's you're going to benefit from the Quran. If you go with that intention, alhamdulillah. If you're going because you know what, he has a voice like a melody. He recites like a bird.
That's almost like a singer, because there's certain singers, the kuffar singers, they have beautiful voices.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they can stir the heart. You hear that voice, and they talk about love or certain things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's why, as I said, lip service, sugarcoating, right? We say things with our tongues, but really our hearts are in different places.
True. No, you've put it in a very beautiful way. Allahumma barak.
We're getting close to the end. Sheikh, if you can, because the last 10 nights is very important. And out of the last 10 nights, we have Laylatul Qadr, Night of Power, and that's worth 1,000 months. Could you tell us what the best acts of worship would be to do in those 10? Should we just all go into Taqwa? Or, how can we balance? Because 1,000 nights in worship, subhanAllah. But was it 1,000 years, right?
Alfi shahr, 1,000 months.
1,000 months, sorry, 1,000 months. So that's 83 years, I think it was.
83 years.
That's like, if you got that one day, you're good for the whole year, no?
Subhanallah.
So what would you advise for those 10?
So the Prophet ﷺ, when it was described that when he would enter into the last 10 nights, kana yuhyi al-layla, meaning he used to stay awake for the whole night. Ayqadha ahlahu, he would wake up his family, meaning he would encourage them to engage in ibadah, because the more the household is awake, the more you can sort of be focused on ibadah. When you see someone sleeping and they're under their warm duvet, right, you feel like, okay, let me also sleep. But ayqadha ahlahu, he would wake up his whole family, right? So to get into that spirit of worship, that's an important thing. And it mentions kana yuhyi al-layl wa ahya al-layla, that he would spend the night awake, and shadda mi'zarahu, right, which has an interesting interpretation. Some say it literally means to tighten his belt, right, which can mean two things. It can either mean that he wouldn't be intimate with his wives because he would be so dedicated to worship, or it's like an expression we say, you would roll up your sleeves. Yeah. So that's what we would say the equivalent of in English.
Yeah,
so
to focus mode, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. So that's one thing. So what you really want to utilize in particular are the nights. The nights in particular are special. And so you want to try to get into the habit of staying awake, during the majority of the night. So you need to prepare yourselves mentally, and prepare your days in particular. Now, obviously, that's going to be really difficult for people who are working 9 to 5. For example, if you're working 9 to 5, to stay awake for the whole night would seem almost impossible, because when are you going to sleep? The gap between Fajr, especially in the winter.
Would you say it's important for them if they can take a week off?
Yeah, I mean, that's an amazing opportunity to be able to have time off. So if you can arrange to have time off during the last 10 nights, I would say definitely utilize that, if you have the opportunity to do that. If not, then try to at least focus on the odd nights in particular more than any other night. And even then, if you can't do that, then at least the weekends, for example. And even i'tikaf doesn't have to be for 10 days. It can be for a short period of time.
Salah.
Exactly. A lot of people don't know that i'tikaf, it could be from one salat to another. So if you go into the masjid with the intention of i'tikaf,
even one night,
if that's your intention, my intention is to do i'tikaf for one night, then observe the rules of i'tikaf for that night.
Laylatul Qadr, I know there's...
Go ahead.
No, we're going to ask. It's the hadith is, it's in the last 10 on the odd night. But a lot of people say, especially at least Bengali, say it's the 27th.
I think we do say that.
It's a common. I mean, Ibn Abbas was of the opinion that is likely to be on the 27th, and that's like many fuqaha say this, many scholars they say this, that it's likely. But the last thing that we want to take from that is that we only put our eggs in the basket on the 27th night. No, that shouldn't be the case, because there is a very strong possibility that it could be on another odd night. In fact, many scholars even say they're of the view that it alternates every year. So on one year it could be the 27th, another year could be the 25th.
SubhanAllah. But are there any signs that people can look out for?
Well, before the signs, I would say that firstly, people need to have in their minds that let me take the most of the last 10 nights, all of them if possible. If not, then at least the odd nights, and try and focus on them and increase in your ibadah during those nights.
Because I heard from hadith, or I can't remember, but all certain signs that you know for a fact that is Laylatul Qadr. Like you want to hear a dog bark. You want to hear, what's it called?
After
the rays of the sun.
So all the certain signs that, you know.
There are, I mean, those are indications. But at the same time, they're not so definitive because, you know, those indications can be relative.
And it's after as well. So if you're fixed on just the 27th and you find out it was the 23rd, then
and also the danger of being of thinking, oh, that definitely. Imagine if, for example, it was on you thought it was on the 21st. Then you'll be like, oh, khalas, the 20, you know, it's gone now. And then you don't take advantage of the 23rd, 25th, 27th. And it might have actually been one of those odd nights. So I don't think we should concentrate too much on the signs and whether it's happened, you know, or not. If anything, you know, it should be something that you just observe. Oh, it could have been last night because of these signs. Okay, that's it. But let it not be something that determines the state of your worship in the nights to come thereafter.
Would you, just for it to be, because we're coming to the end, for the best, and I hope everyone that's watching, inshallah, wants to make this Ramadan the best that they've had. But give us 3 perhaps simple nasihas that we can take on and say, look, this is going to add value to this Ramadan more than ever.
Firstly, what I would say is understand the purpose of fasting. Understand that what you are trying to do by not eating and drinking is disciplining yourself to control your passions and your desires. If you are not learning to discipline yourself in the month of Ramadan, then you have essentially missed the purpose of fasting. So that's one thing. Discipline, right? Tahdhibun nafs, like disciplining you and controlling your desires, your lusts, everything.
And that discipline in itself achieves taqwa as well.
Yes, that's the idea. That's what the taqwa is that discipline. And secondly, what I would say is after focusing on the major objectives of fasting, is utilize, and this is something I say a lot to people, utilize what many people often overlook, which is that when you're hungry and thirsty and you're weak, people unfortunately forget this aspect and they think, oh, okay, you know, because they want to do so much ibadah, but then they get bogged down by the fact that they're so hungry, tired, and weak. Instead of getting bogged down by that, take advantage of that, because when you are hungry, thirsty, and weak, that's your way of expressing your servitude to Allah. That's way of you saying to her, Ya Allah, I am weak. As Musa alayhi salam said, Rabbi inni lima anzalta ilayya min khairin faqir. Ya Allah, I am poor. Whatever you have of goodness for me, I am in need of it. Right? So use this as an opportunity to express your iftiqar, your sense of need for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't, you know, get, you know, frustrated by your fatigue, being fatigued, for example. No, when you feel that fatigue, say, Ya Allah, I'm your poor servant. I'm in need of your assistance. So utilize that. Secondly, I would say. And thirdly, engage in multiple and different acts of ibadah. Diversify your worship. Don't just stick to one thing. Don't just stick to Quran. Have times where you do dhikr. Have times where you do nawafil. Have times where you look actively to give sadaqah. Right? Have times where you try to do other good deeds, like let me do something to please my parents, for example. You know, there's a diversity of good deeds. So try to diversify your worship.
There isn't one act that would be better than any of them. So
well, definitely, you know,
praying, Quran, all of them are
good. And I think obviously Quran is one of the most important things I think we should engage with in the Quran in the month of Ramadan. Also, you know, extra nawafil in prayer and dhikr as well.
Okay, excellent. Right, I think we're going to end it here, inshallah. I hope it's been beneficial to everyone, inshallah.
It's been very beneficial to me.
And make it the best Ramadan, make your intentions and carry on, especially the last 10. And if you have work, just forget about it. Just take time off. In fact, don't even go to work, inshallah. Last 10, get 83 years of worship, inshallah. Another good thing, guys, to do is subscribe. If you haven't subscribed, please. I know many of you have already. Just click one button, inshallah. We're trying to do khair and let this community grow. Jazakallah khairan and Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. Inshallah. Assalamualaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.